Morning, everybody. I'm Linda.
Hey, Rainey. Sorry, I was getting us set up on YouTube, so I didn't have my Zoom screen up. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Excellent. Good, good. Good. How are you? Let's see. Hi, Bob. Hi, Peter. How are you all?
Hi, Linda.
Hi,
Hello,
Linda.
hello. Hi, everyone in the Gampa. Hello, hello. It's good to see everyone. Hello, everyone on YouTube as well. We should be getting started momentarily. Hi, Chitra. It's good to see you. Well, while we're waiting, I can mention again that Kadampa Center is partnering with a nonprofit organization called Note in the Pocket, and we are collecting socks and underwear. They must be brand new and still in the package. No used socks or underwear, please. And they can be for men, women, all sizes, boys and girls, all sizes. And our collection bin is just outside the door. You probably saw it as you came in. It's a big black, like Rubbermaid tub kind of thing with a red lid. So items can be dropped off there anytime. The center doesn't have to be open. Nobody needs to be here. You can just drop it in the bin. And our outreach team, headed by Elise, will grab those items on a regular basis. So feel free to drop anything by anytime. That's going to be happening through the end of February. Dawn's here. As Dawn is doing, don't forget to silence your cell phones if you haven't already. We're starting out with 3 prostration with Dawn, if you'd like. So Dawn's explaining, sorry, for YouTube and Zoom, Dawn's explaining the benefit of doing prostrations, and the mantra is a multiply mantra that goes with the prostrations. So I'll say it while you're prostrating. Om Namo Manjushriye, Namo Sushriye, Namo Tamashriye Soha. Om Namo Manjushriye, Namo Sushriye, Namo Tamashriye Soha. Om Namo Manjushriye, Namo Sushriye, Namo Uttamashriye Soha. Fantastic. Don says his knee replacement is working. Let's rejoice.
So, good morning again. So let's take a couple of minutes and do whatever mindfulness practice that you're familiar with, maybe you're not familiar with one, and then you can just, follow your breath. If this is new territory for you, but just to bring your awareness to the in-breath and the out-breath. And we'll do this for a few minutes. And then again, most of you know it's really difficult to keep our attention on the breath for even 5 seconds. So don't be disappointed or beat yourself up if your mind takes off on a tangent. Just notice that and bring it back again and again and again, as many times as you need to do that. To make the practice and the teachings today meaningful and have the most benefit, we need to develop what's called the Bodhi mind, or the awakening mind. And the 3 principles of the path are kind of the basis of everything that we do here at Kadampa Center. These are the first is called renunciation, which is actually having compassion for ourselves. Realizing that this life is precious. It could be over at any minute, any second. That what goes around comes around, and mostly what the karma that we create is motivated by selfishness. It's pretty rare that we do anything purely compassionate, pure motivation. But not that we don't, but most of the stuff we do is all about me, I, and that the future is not going to go well with that kind of karma looming, just waiting to sprout. So, we have some compassion for ourselves and make this determination to be free from this cycle of uncontrolled causation, as Jeffrey Hopkins calls it. But it's like, We want to be free of suffering and its causes. And that's compassion, that's renunciation, determination to be free. And bodhicitta, excuse me, is in this compassion, mainly compassion for others based on a series of contemplations, but it basically starts out with having an equanimous state of mind where we don't cling to our friends or feel aversion toward the people we label enemy or whatever, and then indifference toward the strangers. But we try to develop, because these are all labels that are so changeable. We develop this equanimity, and then we reflect on this, that we are all equal in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. We reflect on this, the faults of self-cherishing selfishness. The real source of all of our problems lives right in our heart. It's a self-centered attitude that every action, body, speech, and mind, coming from there will always lead to future problems and dukkha. And then cherishing others is the source of all happiness. So we want to exchange that attitude. And so now our come from now is that we cherish others. Everything that we do is based on this attitude. Lama Yeshe used to say, as much as I can, I dedicate my life to others. And then we develop this supreme wish to help others and guide them from suffering to supreme happiness, and realizing that the only being that could do that would be a Buddha. Then we set our sights on the highest potential, fulfilling our human potential to become supremely enlightened for the sake of others. So that's bodhicitta. Again, sounds crazy, but it's the attitude that's most powerful for spiritual practice, is that we set our sights on helping others, and the best method to do that is to get our act together, to develop our qualities and eliminate our faults as much as possible until we die. And then emptiness, of course, is, we just begin to see through the illusion of how we project a false reality and believe it and react to it, and creates all kinds of problems for ourselves. Everything seems to be self-existent, independently existent, like everybody would see it that way because that's the way I see it. We don't think about it. We don't think deeply that everything exists dependently, in dependence upon causes and conditions, parts, and a consciousness that labels or designates. It's completely the opposite of the way we see things. And so we need to have this attitude that everything appears as an illusion. It's not an illusion, but we have this notion, at least that things do exist, but it's like a dream, like in a dream, as an illusion. But those are the three principles of the path. That's the basis of our practice here at Kadampa Center. And it's the beginning of the whole process of developing our heart and mind. We'll do the refuge and bodhicitta prayer on page...
Page 34 in the prayer book.
Yeah. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. And since we have a video to watch, maybe we'll just launch into that. We don't have a lot of time. But before we do that, I just want to pass one little thought on, and as you're listening to Khyentse Rinpoche's teachings, see how this might fit into what he's saying. And this is about friendships. I just listened to an Audible book on this 85-year study that's been done at Harvard. I referenced it last time, and it said the take-home message was this, that those people that had friendships, I'm not talking about just hanging out ships, but real friendships at work, at home, with friends and so forth. They had real friendships. Those people did better, health-wise and mentally. Their sense of satisfaction with their lives and their health was better, the people that had good friendships. And so the Buddha said, on friendships, he said, not associating with fools, associating with the wise, honoring those worthy of honor. This is the greatest blessing. And then, in an ancient Buddhist story, the Buddha's faithful attendant, Ananda, asked about the importance of having wholesome companions. Ananda asked the Buddha whether having noble friends and companions wasn't half the holy life. And the Buddha replied, "Do not say so, Ananda. Noble friends and companions are the whole of the holy life." That's pretty wild. Noble friends and companions are the whole of the holy life. So how does that, think about how these teachings today fit into that, how important friendships are, good, authentic friendships. So, all right.
Don, before we start the video, there was a request that you explain, so that folks on Zoom and YouTube could hear the benefit of doing prostrations. Well,
it's just, there's so many benefits. I mean, sometimes there's this thing, it's called a nundra, that in the Gelugpa tradition, in all the Buddhist traditions, doing 100,000 prostrations is one of the main practices to sort of clear out a lot of the physical negative karma. But when it's done properly, usually, I remember I had Lama Yeshe taught me how to do prostrations many years ago, and it was like you're using your body, speech, and mind when you're doing it. You're doing as you do a prostration, you're visualizing like the Buddha's in front of you. You can imagine rainbow light coming into the crown of your head, completely purifying your negative karma of body, speech, and mind. Okay? Meanwhile, you're doing, so you're being mindful of that. You're also saying the mantra, and you could be Om Mani Padme Hum, could be Tayata Mani, any Buddhist mantra. When we did the multiplying mantra is another one. But Yeshe we were talking in terms of doing this with visualizing Chenrezig in front. And then when, we prostrate and our body goes out and we complete the prostration, we imagine that light has, again, purified our body, speech, and mind. We get up quickly and do it again. So it's a very powerful way to purify body, speech, and mind. But the biggest, it's said, and I don't think anybody would argue with this, arrogance, or I know it all, or I've already got the answers, is the biggest obstacle to learning. And so this is a way of, in a way, humbling ourselves when we prostrate. So it's an antidote to arrogance. So it's a great way to start out when you're listening to teachings, is to do this practice to combat arrogance, and at the same time we're paying homage. We're not bowing to graven images or statues that or inanimate and things like that. They mean something to our minds when we understand what they mean. We're paying homage to the enlightened beings who these statues, these icons symbolize, but also our ability to become enlightened. So we're paying homage to our own Buddha nature. We're paying homage to their realizations of the enlightened beings, but our own potential to have those realizations. We're paying homage to the Sangha, but our own ability to become, Sangha, a true helper to others along the path. So there's a lot of levels, but that's the main ones.
Thank you. And for those of you who want to see that multiply mantra, it is on page 171 in the Gold Prayer Book. And I just put it in the chat on Zoom. I'll get it up on YouTube momentarily. And then we will be going over stanza 7 and 8 with the 8 verses of thought transformation. And that can be found on page 161 in the Gold Prayer Book. And I did put the link to that text in the chat on both YouTube and Zoom, so you guys can see that as well. All right, you ready, Don?
Yeah.
So Jebaye Pede Mano Kalamba, my neto Dungaka, Soye Dala Lemar shows, Tanti Niso Jebe Gona, Nisa Yenanda, Jebe Gona Yenanda, Hakotarawa,
This is stanza 7.
Embate, Magese Jetonjela Pazo Gares, Pemba to Devana Tesodo, Magese Jetonjela Pape, Magese Jetoso, Nevato, Dungala Sobatanda, Sozola, Lemba shows in the Tatel, Tonle Sugares, Tonle.
So next stanza is mainly talking about giving and taking practice. Giving and taking practice with other mother sentence beings. Can you read now? There's two stanzas, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
6. When somebody whom I've benefited and in whom I have great hopes gives me terrible harm.
Maybe one more before that. You only finished before
5?
that.
I think I read 5.
Okay.
Skip that one?
No, two of them. Whatever you haven't read, please read both of them.
Yeah, I don't think we read number 6 yet.
Okay.
When somebody whom I've benefited and in whom I have great hopes gives me terrible harm, I shall regard that person as my holy guru. 7. In short, both directly and indirectly, I offer every happiness and benefit to all my mothers. I shall secretly take upon myself all their harmful actions and suffering.
Just like mainly Tonglen practice now.
Tonle so Dewa to so Gangalolo, Mageseje to Jalapa, Mimbasho, Mageseje to so Dunga to Ganga shows in Melo Jani Tezogano tell Tonle Segulares.
Like with mainly deliberately offering all the goodness for the others, then taking their miserable conditions out of compassion. So that's Tonglen practice, and doing that with some kind of prayer means wish.
Mage Semje Tomche Sega, so Martin one to make Pemuseba Chemore. Naruso in Amate Chemo Chegar. Carrier to Naruso Tanda Chiche Yagado. Not to Jangina, Tumba in a Latin in a and then the Chicheng in a Kangal, Amana to Shua, Amala and Shua, Remato, Zendaka Mare, Amamelangaro to Shea Chegumaraba. Yet Amade had never catch and Muresa.
All this opportunity now we have, in my case, learning, studying, all of that, all this due to the kindness that we receive from the mother, otherwise we will be not here.
There's a
reason why there's all mother sentient beings. The word mother is there, so that amount of kindness we receive, our survival is very much depend on the mothers. Some Lama says that if the mother is not careful when we are in her womb, she becomes careless, probably die 100 times and probably rebirth 100 times because of that carelessness. But that's not the way it happens. Like that. If mother become careless, maybe we already went through 100 birth and 100 death. So meaning like there's great risk when we are in the womb, so that mother needs a lot of care for the child.
That was it. Well, okay. So he's referring to Tonglen practice, you know, the Tibetan word Tonglen, which means giving and taking. And it's also, you know, when you're developing bodhicitta, it's, you know, after you do you know, we did a little bit of it, but we didn't do Tonglen. But when you start, you look at the faults of self-cherishing, selfishness, which is our biggest obstacle, right? We talk about how that's the cause of all the suffering. From beginningless time until right now is the self-cherishing, selfish mind. And the cause of all happiness is cherishing others. Is the next contemplation. By the way, that kind of blew my mind when I first heard that self-cherishing was the cause of, well, self-cherishing selfishness now. I didn't really, I never, when I first heard that, I was kind of like, oh no. Because I'd been taking care of number one, you know. And it was like, wow, I got some work to do here. And then cherishing others is the cause of all happiness. And then you mentally, you imagine, you switch the attitude of self-cherishing for cherishing others. Now we don't become somebody else, but we, you know, right up until now, our motivation has been selfishness. And now our motivation is selflessness, you know, being other, outwardly focused. Self-cherishing, the energy of self-cherishing is this way, isn't it? It's all going here. Cherishing others is looking out. How can I help? How can I make a difference? How can I matter? You know, like that. So they say in the teachings, all happiness comes from cherishing others. That's kind of a profound, major, an assertion that needs to be looked into. Is that really true? And so we're changing, you know, so we're switching the attitude to where we cherish others. So we get up in the morning, we're thinking about others from the moment we get up, we get out of bed, because I'm going to work for others. We get cleaned up so we look decent and don't smell bad for others. You know, we eat healthy food to take care of ourselves for others. The whole focus of our whole life, you know, makes a complete turnaround. That's the point of it. And then the next meditation is Tonglen, where he's referencing here, where we, in the beginning, several people, sometimes it's taught differently. Sometimes it's said you should take on the suffering of others first and then give happiness, because you can't give people happiness or beings happiness that are suffering. But it's always taught this way. It's always taught giving and taking first. And I think that works for me, because if and we always start with ourselves. So if you're practicing Tonglen, you imagine yourself in front, and you imagine that from your heart, and you know, your body kind of fills with light, the light of everything that's positive, good karma, and so forth, and good energy and compassion, wisdom, and everything that's good and positive. And we imagine, usually it can be done a lot of ways, but you can imagine that you breathe out your right nostril, and that white light gradually, it doesn't have to go in one breath. You know, you can take your time. The most important thing is to get a feeling for this, that you're wishing yourself happiness and the causes of happiness, which is the definition of love in Buddhism, isn't it? May I be happy and have the causes of happiness. May I be safe. May I be healthy, happy, live with ease. May I be happy and have the causes of happiness. And as we do that, we imagine that white light is coming from this body and entering the imagined self in front, completely filling us with this healing white light. And then from ourselves arises this sort of black, dark, nasty smog, smoke, whatever you want to think. But it symbolizes all of our negativities, all our negative karma, obstacles to our future happiness, and so forth. And we imagine that, and we breathe that. So, and it doesn't have to be done in one breath. We gradually breathe that, and it can come back. It can come in the form of dark smoke, and it gets, we can breathe it in until it gets like right at our nose, at our nostril, and then we breathe it in, and it goes right to our heart, and explodes this orb, this dark Rocky Mountain orb of self-cherishing, completely demolishes it like an atomic bomb blew it up. And it frees us of that, of that self-cherishing attitude, and our body completely fills with light. That, and then we can do that again. We wish, may I be happy. Oh, by the way, so taking on the suffering, as we take on the suffering, may I be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. That's the definition of compassion in Buddhism, isn't it? So may I have happiness in its causes. This is the definition of love, and we're practicing love by giving happiness in its causes. And we're taking away suffering and its causes, i.e., we're practicing compassion when we take away our own suffering. And then again, it's destroying our self-cherishing mind. The last thing that ego wants is to take on others' suffering. And yet, this is what we do. And then we can practice with, again, it's generally, you start with people that are close to you because it's easier to wish them happiness. Because frankly, if you're trying to do Tonglen with somebody you hate, it will not go well. We have to develop. So this is why it's important in the beginning to develop a feeling of closeness to this other person. This is why I think giving is so important, at least for the difficult people in our lives. We're wishing them, and just think about it, just for a moment, you close your eyes for just 2 minutes, and think about somebody that, let's start with somebody that you're close to, and wish them, mentally say, may you be happy and have the causes of happiness, and then just breathe out in some white light. Imagine that it fills their body and that they have it. They have happiness and the causes of happiness. And then imagine that all of their suffering, not only their present suffering, but their future suffering, which is inevitable, isn't it? We all have lots and lots of karma, negative karma that will ripen in sickness, old age, and death, just for starters. All right? And that's coming. So we imagine that we're taking all of their suffering and wishing them to be free of suffering and its causes, and in the form of black light, and it goes to our nostrils. We take our time. It doesn't have to be done in one breath. May she be free of suffering and its causes. Gets right to our nose, and then we breathe it in, explodes, destroys the self-cherishing I in the heart, completely demolishes it, and our body's filled with the light of all that's good, loving kindness, compassion, wisdom, and so forth, like that. And so we do it again and again. And we practice giving to the people that we're close to, and then May you have happiness and causes of happiness, which is practicing love. And may you be free of suffering and its causes, which is practicing compassion. Right? This sounds a little bit like Jesus on the cross. I think there's more than a coincidence. Now, and then here you go, you work with your so-called, take somebody that you do not like. And this takes a lot of work, but you might have to go through, the equanimity meditation. You might have to do some work to actually do this sincerely with somebody that you feel aversion toward. But the point is, you want to get to the point where you can send this person this light and sincerely wish them happiness and the causes of happiness. May you have happiness. I'm thinking of somebody right now. May he have happiness and the causes of happiness. Send him white light, fills his body. He gets it. He gets happiness in his causes. And then his suffering, both present and the future suffering, comes off of him like black smoke. And we think, may he be free of suffering and its causes, compassion. Breathe that into my heart, destroying self-cherishing. And then our body's filled with light again. And then we do it again. May he have happiness in his causes. And he has it. As we breathe out the light, he's filled with white light, which symbolizes all that's positive and good. And we take on his suffering. May he be free of suffering and his causes. Again, the action of compassion. So we practice this. And this, obviously, this is what I say. I like the idea of giving, and Tonglen does mean giving and taking, and it says so in all the texts. Most of the texts, including the Guru Puja, says you practice giving first and taking second. But other people would say maybe different. But you will not want to take on the suffering of an enemy. In fact, when you see your enemies suffer, you might rejoice, which is, of course, not good. So we need to actually develop a sense of closeness to this person that we feel aversion toward, to even want to take on their suffering. In other words, compassion would be impossible towards somebody we hate or feel strong aversion toward. Impossible. So we can practice loving kindness, compassion, loving kindness, compassion. And then we can take like whole groups of people, like people that have serious illnesses that are dying from cancer. We can imagine like countless living beings that are all dying from whatever the causes are, right this minute. And the suffering that they're experiencing, they're freaking out, they're fearful, they don't know what's going to happen. They're getting ready to give up the only thing they've ever known, which is their selves, and go into whatever. They don't know. There's a sense of fear and dread for most people at this moment. And we imagine that we send these beings, all the people that are dying from cancer, we're sending them, may you be happy and have the causes of happiness, and feel it. It's not enough to say the words. It's not enough to send out the light. It's important to actually see these beings and imagine their suffering, and then wish them to be happy and have the causes of happiness. And then imagine that their suffering all comes up in the form of black cloud, and we breathe that into our gradually toward us, and then it goes in our nostril, blowing, destroying our selfish, self-cherishing mind. And we're filled with light, the light of peace, tranquility, satisfaction, loving kindness, and all of that. All the things. Our Buddha nature basically completely manifesting. And then here's the time when it's going to be the most helpful to practice Tonglen, is when we're dying, to be able to be lying on your deathbed. Imagine this, maybe even now. Imagine yourself that you're dying and you're coming toward the end of this life. And instead of freaking out, you're thinking about other people. You're thinking, may my death and any fear or uncertainty or physical or mental suffering that I'm experiencing now suffice for countless living beings who are dying or will be dying in the future. I'm going to take all of their suffering into my heart right now. Destroy selfish, self-cherishing attitude. And then we imagine we give them like peace and tranquility and compassion and loving kindness, all the positive things. We're giving them what they want and what they need, which is no fear, to die fearlessly, to die well, to be able to let go. So we're taking on the suffering of all of these beings that are dying as we're dying, and we're giving them happiness and its causes as much as possible, which is, again, the practice of loving kindness. So even on our deathbed, if we can practice compassion and loving kindness, compassion and loving kindness, like what an amazing way to lead this life rather than freaking out. So this is the practice of Tonglen. So powerful, such a powerful way to develop the Bodhi mind, the awakening mind. All right, let's do the next one.
Do you have time to answer a question from a student on YouTube?
Yeah.
How can we practice this teaching in actual life beyond doing it in meditation? Can we do this in our community?
Yeah, that's a great question. In the Dalai Lama's text, one of the things he talked about was, it creates huge obstacles if we're making a big show of our spiritual practice. We don't want to do that. So, so this is something, I've heard there's some great practitioners who every breath they take is basically they're practicing Tonglen 24/7. So they imagine with every breath they take, they're giving happiness and taking on suffering. And so we can be walking down the street and see a complete stranger and remind ourselves that, well, they want to be happy and they don't want to suffer like me. They're just like me. And so may they have happiness in the causes of happiness. And may they be free of suffering in the causes of suffering. If you go, this works at parties too, by the way. How everybody gets, at parties, people change. They don't, a lot of us are not ourselves. We're not natural when we go to these social events. But to be at an event like that or talking to someone and actually to practice Tonglen, right then, look them right in the eye, realizing that they are just like I am. They want to be happy. They don't want to suffer. And they are suffering, and think, well, you wouldn't say it, may you be happy in the cause of happiness. Don't do that. But think it, as you're sitting there talking and listening and being present as much as you can also practice Tonglen. May you have happiness in the causes of happiness. May you be free of suffering. It makes people real instead of an object that we're, like a talking hand. Talk to the hand. No, talk to the person. This person wants to be happy, doesn't want to suffer. So we wish them happiness and we wish them to be free of suffering. So we're practicing loving kindness and compassion even as we're with people individually. I have a great job in the sense that that's what I do every day. If I did it, I forget. But I do have it written on a little board. I say, Tonglen, before I go in to see a patient, try to practice Tonglen. And try to wish them happiness and the causes and be free of suffering and causes. I forget to do that about 99.9% of the time, but it is a very powerful practice, something we all need to, we don't need to do it, but it is one of the most powerful practices in Buddhism. And for example, when you go to the higher practices, Tantra, they're all involved. I mean, I'll just, this is in books, so I'm not making this up, but in tantric practice, if you imagine yourself as a deity and you're saying the mantra, you imagine that oftentimes you imagine that you're sending out countless Buddhas from your heart. They go out to countless living beings who are suffering, and you alleviate their suffering as a Buddha and guide them to supreme enlightenment. And then you imagine you absorb that Buddha back into your heart, and then you send the Buddha out again. Whatever practice you're doing, maybe it's Tara, maybe it's Kala Chakra, whatever it is, but Tonglen is a huge part of Tantra, huge part of Tantra. So as a beginning practice for us beginners, it's a great place, great foundation practice. All right. Is there any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you. Is this on? Okay. How does not being able to change other people's karma fit in with our thinking on Tonglen? Is it just not even there?
Well, we cannot, everybody has their own karma, and we cannot, change their karma, right? But we're trying to train ourselves. This is a training. It's a mind training.
For us.
They call it, the 8 verses of mind training. Mm-hmm. We're trying to deepen our practice of love of love and compassion. And so I remember Jeffrey, well, it's not that big a deal, but I remember Jeffrey Hopkins, he was a professor at UVA many years ago. Most people probably don't know who he is because he stopped writing. He wrote many books and used to translate for the Dalai Lama the first 10 years he was in this country. And I remember I was talking to him one time and he said, look, when you walk in the hospital, you should imagine all the suffering of everybody in the hospital and take it into your heart and destroy your self-cherishing selfishness, and then send out like light, the light of love and compassion and healing to all of these people like that. You can practice it, when you're making rounds or whatever in the hospital. And it's a very practical practice, very practical and useful. Yeah, Elise.
I would say that once you've practiced that attitude that you're talking about, that will just naturally translate into your actions. Because then if you're thinking that way, you will hold the door open for someone or have a little more patience with listening to them. And so it naturally will translate into your actions and positively affect your community.
Oh, exactly. I mean, that's the hope, isn't it? I mean, obviously, the sincerity and the depth of our practice is going to, whether we get results or not. Don't expect the world to change just because that everybody in the hospital got well because you practiced Tonglen at the front door. But again, we're trying to train our mind to have this attitude 24/7, So it's a mind training technique, but extremely powerful one, and strongly emphasized in this tradition. You don't hear about this practice, at least I never heard about it in the Theravada tradition, or is it even Zen? But definitely in the Tibetan tradition, it's a big deal. Mm-hmm.
So, am I audible? Okay. Okay, so
a little bit louder, please.
I was wanting to know, when we were doing the practice today, how do I ride my breath? Like what I was imagining when I'm giving, it didn't feel very natural to my body. Like I wanted to breathe in instead from the right nostril.
Yeah.
But according to giving, I was supposed to exhale from the right nostril. Am I right?
Yeah, you can breathe. I mean, there were different ways to do it. Some people breathe out both nostrils in, both nostrils, but the one technique that I was describing, you're breathing out white light, which symbolizes all your good karma, all your roots of virtue, everything that's positive in the world that you can give. You're imagining that you're giving it away. And that they get it, and that they in the beginning is you, because you're working with yourself first, and you imagine again that they have benefited from this. Again, this is mind training, and then you imagine that their suffering is in the form of black clouds, and it's the suffering that we're not talking about past suffering. We're talking about present and future suffering. Okay, because all we have is now, right? But the future is coming. We live, so we're taking their present and future suffering into our heart, and we imagine what that is. We try to be real about it. Like if it's someone we love, we know what they're struggling with, and we imagine that we're taking that again into our heart, and it destroys our self-cherishing selfishness, and then our body's completely filled with this light of, it's basically our Buddha nature, our Buddha potential, but also our roots of virtue and karma and all that.
So I've been practicing this particular verse at home every day, and I have taken a responsibility, but I do feel when I'm practicing this particular verse in the next one, I don't have the capacity in me. Like I feel the friend energy and the neutral energy that I'm practicing of an innocent life.
Yeah.
She seems to be stronger than and more empowering than me, and I feel my physical body does not have the capacity to train my mind.
Yeah. Well, let me read something. This is exactly what His Holiness is saying in this book. He said, in this verse, the suffering being referred to is perhaps so strong that at least at the level of thought, one can take upon oneself the suffering of pain and hurt. One can also, in thought, take upon oneself the negativities that lie at the root of these sufferings. Also, one can share all the positive qualities one has, such as one's joy, the causes of joy, roots of virtue, positive actions, and so on. One offers these positive qualities in order to other sentient beings. Then he goes on to say, the adjective secretly refers to Tonglen practice, the practice of giving and taking. The word secretly suggests it's a form of practice of compassion that perhaps may not be suitable at the beginner stage. It is a form of mental training that requires a certain amount of depth of courage and commitment. So it may not work for us beginners, It may be, it may take a lot of time. Like for example, having compassion for your friends is easy, but for the neutral people and the enemies, not so easy. So yeah, again, you have to be patient. We have to be patient with ourselves when we're practicing, doing these mind training techniques that we may not be ready. This might be too strong a medicine right now, or you can play with it in whatever way you can. It's always, the imprints are good. And maybe someday it would be even more meaningful. That's what I would say. Yeah.
So we're out of time for verse 8. I don't know if you want to just say something about it, Don, and then we can close.
How long does it take Kinship shaded? Okay, I'll just read this verse 8. May they not be defiled by the concepts of the 8 mundane concerns. And, wait a minute now, my glass isn't working. May they not be defiled by the concepts of the 8 mundane concerns, and aware of all things as illusory, may they, ungrasping, be free from bondage. Well, that's an easy one. 25 words or less. Well, everybody knows, I mean, not everybody, but we always talk about how he said, may they not be defiled by the concepts, the 8 mundane concerns. The 8 mundane concerns, this is really everything that we cling to is considered to be part of that. So we usually say the 4 that we cling to that are pretty obvious are pleasure, gain, fame, and praise. Those are the 4 delicious things that we all want and strongly desire, right? We cling to that. And by the same token, we feel aversion toward their opposites: pain, loss, disgrace, and blame. So again, we live our lives in constant pursuit of quote, happiness, which these things seem to symbolize, gain, pleasure, fame, and so forth, and all the delicious stuff. And we live in constant fear and aversion toward the so-called negative stuff. But guess what? It's all part of life, isn't it? We're going to get stuff and we're going to lose stuff. We're going to have pleasure and we're going to have pain. We're going to be praised and we're going to be blamed, and so on. It's all part of life. It's the roller coaster. And if we cling to the deliciousness stuff and we have aversion, or I call it negative, we cling to not having the opposite, we're just going to suffer all the time. We won't even be able to fully enjoy the things that are pleasurable because we're clinging to them so desperately. Oh, it won't last. I know it won't last. And it won't. If we can just be present with whatever's happening, be fully open to the experience. When pleasure happens, enjoy it without any expectation that it's going to last, knowing that it's impermanent. And then when it goes away and then the pain comes, we experience it, understanding also that that's impermanent. But it's also part of life, part of unenlightened existence is pleasure and pain. So those are the 8 worldly concerns. And he's saying that may our practice not be defiled by the concepts of the 8 mundane concerns, and aware that all things are illusory. May they, ungrasping, be free of bondage. And we talked about this at the very beginning about emptiness. It's like, the way we see the world, this cell phone looks like everybody sees the same thing, but no, we all have our own experience, don't we? We project our reality. And so we all agree it's a cell phone, but a dog would not. A dog would just chew on it. So if it was a cell phone, the dog would start talking or barking or whatever. So things don't exist independently, inherently out there. They exist dependently. They exist in dependence upon causes and conditions, right? They depend independence upon their parts, and dependence upon a consciousness that labels, okay? So things appear to exist independently of our mind labeling, right? You get that? We use that terminology all the time. Things that seem they exist inherently, independently, in and of themselves, really, truly existing out there, completely like everybody would see it the same way because it's so real. And we believe that. But when we examine more carefully, we see that no, nothing exists independently. It exists in dependence upon causes and conditions, parts, and a designating consciousness. And I remember, I'm quoting Jeffrey Hopkins again. Jeffrey said, that's not that profound. That's not that big a deal. Anybody can see that. That's obvious. Things exist in dependence upon parts, causes and conditions, and a consciousness that labels it. But what is profound is that reasoning, the king of reasoning, dependent arising, is exactly the opposite of the way we see things. Things appear one way and exist another. And so we need to we began, after we practiced this a little bit and thought about it, we began to see things as illusory. Like we're waking in the middle of a dream, things seem so real. But then we awaken from the dream and realize it wasn't real. And so we began to practice seeing everything as like an illusion. And so we don't grasp at things. We don't get tagged when somebody calls us a jerk, and we don't grasp at things that look delicious. We have a peaceful life, more satisfying life. So that's what he's saying. And aware that all things are illusory, may they, ungrasping, be free from bondage. So that's called, freedom. Yeah.
Thank you, Don. That was awesome. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Robbie Watkins momentarily, but if you do want to review Khyentse Rinpoche's teachings on the 8 verses of thought transformation, you can find it on the Kadampa Center's YouTube channel, and just look for the teaching that was done on November 19th, 2022.
Thank you. Thank you. Am I on? Okay. Okay. My job this morning is to remind people that our annual appeal is ongoing. If you go to the website, there's a link to a wonderful display of everything that was accomplished this past year through the generosity of our members. And Sandy Carlson created that in their photos and write-ups. And it's really quite inspiring when you look and see what we did during this past year, even in spite of some difficulties. And just to remind people, Kadampa Center depends entirely on the generosity of the people who come here. We have no outside support from the FPMT or any other organization. And any donations that you're able to make are greatly appreciated. They go to support our teachers, our resident teachers. They go to keep the lights on here in the building and maintenance here at the building. It's a very lean budget, thanks to David Strevel and our financial team. It's a balanced budget. All the details are on the website. So just remind people that this is the time of year, if you can commit to a monthly donation, that really helps all of us who are planning what we're going to do over the next year. So thank you very much for your generosity.
Thank you so much, Robbie. For those of you who don't know, Robbie Watkins is our center director.
The longest running center director in the FPMT history. Pretty good, Robbie. I think getting back to the first line I said, and the Buddha replied, "Do not say so, Ananda. Noble friends and companions are the whole of the holy life." And that's what this center is about. It's about a place where we can come together and practice the Dharma and keep it alive. And that's really important. But it's also a place to develop, spiritual friends, that makes all the difference. At the end of our life, when we look back, the friendships are going to be the things that stand out. So this is a great place to cultivate those relationships. Dedication prayers on page 32.
May no living creature, evil or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvest. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Robbie. Thanks, everyone. We'll
Thank
see you
you,
next
Don
week.
and Robbie. Thank you, Linda, so much, and everyone here.
Don is inviting all of our virtual friends, that means you, to come back.
Thank you.
In human form.
Bye, everyone.